So Kristen, I see that I'm host. Did you do that or did it automatically do it?
It automatically went right back.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
Brian, I'm making you co-host again.
Okay. Just checking to make sure we got everybody back. Are you back, Beth? Okay. Oh, there you are. There's so many squares. I can't always find people. All right. So we got the board back and there's a motion on the floor to hire Rochelle Bohm for social studies. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye.
Congratulations.
Yep. I don't see her here, but welcome aboard if she is. Next up, we have policy BEF, remote participation in board meetings. I think we gave a good bit of the context on this last time, which is that we were operating, still are today, operating under an executive order from the governor, as well as an emergency law. They were tied together, allowing us to hold remote board meetings. Prior to that, anybody who was remote was not a legally valid member of the board towards quorum or voting. So we've been operating under that since March or April of 2019. That ends at the end of July, so in a couple of weeks. So we really can't keep doing that. However, the legislature did pass a law now enabling remote meetings. And it was treated as not an executive order, but an emergency law, which means it takes effect immediately. It doesn't have to wait 90 days, and it was signed by the governor. So it's the law of the land now. The primary requirement of that policy is that anybody who uses it has to have a policy in place on remote meetings. A little bit complicated. The law requires the body who wants to have a remote meeting to have a policy in place to describe what's happening. And actually the law prescribes a bunch of things that policy has to make clear. And so this is the policy. It went through policy subcommittee. I forget when it was. I think it was last Wednesday, actually. And this is, the unanimous recommendation forward from the policy subcommittee. After we had met, Drummond and Woodson came out with their policy. And overall, honestly, I like our language. This often happens. Drummond and Woodson tends to just parrot the law so that they're never making any assertion more than the law makes. Whereas oftentimes I think in this district, we kind of tend to clear plain spoken language. So and there were one or two tweaks that I think came out that I think making it clear who decides that the board meeting is going ahead in the case of an emergency. A couple small tweaks that I think we'd like to revisit in September, but without this policy in place, we can't have remote participants in whether board members or audience in the August meeting. So my recommendation, the policy committee recommendation, is to go ahead and pass this policy. We can tweak it in September, October through the normal process. Tweaks will not be large. All of the requirements of the law are captured. Probably the main thing to note is we are going beyond the requirements of the law. The only requirement of the law is if a board member is participating remotely, then you have to open it up to the public to participate remotely. This policy is saying, barring some emergencies where the power is out or something, we are going to be remote capable at every single meeting, and public participation will be allowed remotely every meeting, even if all 5 board members are physically present. So we're exceeding the capacity. That's another reason not to go with the Drummond and Woodson law. We're exceeding the capacity of the law, but I think there was the requirement of the law, but there was a pretty clear consensus. I think that I heard from the board that we absolutely want to support public participation remotely. I won't read every sentence, but just to note, the annual budget meeting is not allowed to be done remotely. That's recorded in the second paragraph. There are some requirements about, everybody has to be able to speak and hear each other. ADA accommodations. The law, that's not just our doing, the law specifically states that chat and text are not valid forms of formal proceedings. It's basically a speakerphone or up, right? If we were on a speakerphone, that'd be okay. Or if we were on Zoom, that's okay. But if we just had a chat function, including the chat function in Zoom. That has no legal standing. We recognize that, if somebody's internet goes out, we're not liable for the fact that they're not participating in the board meeting. The law, section B, is pretty clearly written in the law that board members are expected to be physically present and participate in person when practicable. The exceptions being if there's some emergency or urgent issue that requires a meeting that can't be done, fixing the boiler in the middle of a snowstorm is one that comes to mind. We can go ahead and meet remotely without a requirement the board members be physically present. Otherwise, board members, unless they're ill or out of town, are expected to be physically present. That comes from the law, not our policy making. And we basically just wanted to have a scenario where if the internet goes out, but we have to have a board meeting that's already scheduled, this is what C is saying, we can go ahead and have the board meeting without public participation. It's an emergency and not to happen often, but we felt it was important to allow that option. Section D basically governs board members. It says a remote board member is a full member of the board. They count towards quorum. If a board member is remote, we have to fall back to roll calls. We can't just, do hand raising, but we're pretty used to that at this point. Executive sessions are like we already said. E, F, and G are just kind of paralleling existing protections in terms of public comment, public notification of board meetings, and sharing of materials for online participants as well as physical participants. So that's what the policy says. Normally by policy, a new policy BDH, whatever the policy on adopting policies is, says that we have a first read and at least 2 weeks later we have a second read. However, we can vote to suspend the rules, which is what we'd be doing if we don't follow that policy, and just adopt this policy tonight on a first read, which would be my recommendation. It's not a common thing for us to do, but it's not unheard of for us to do that either. If we don't do that, remote participation is not going to happen in August. So first motion, I would make a motion to suspend the rules and adopt policy BEF on a single reading tonight. Is there a second?
Second.
Since we're suspending the rules, that requires a supermajority. Let's see if we have that. Beth, how do you vote?
Aye, in favor.
I mean, first, any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm going to vote to go ahead and pass this tonight. The only, thing that I'd like to see different is that I'd like to see that anyone who's physically present is asked to use the same symptom screener that we ask our students to use for in-person learning.
I guess in my mind, that probably comes more under the COVID policy than this particular policy. But I agree that's in force.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, sorry. Other questions before we vote? All right, sorry. So Beth, you're
Aye, yes.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. We have the supermajority and we now have the capacity to have remote meetings. I guess we didn't discuss it, but Meredith and I met with Jason, our tech person today, and he's
Brian,
got some.
I don't think we actually have voted on the policy. I think we just voted to suspend the rules.
Oh, I thought I worded it to adopt the policy on a first read. You want to vote on the policy separately?
I'm under the impression Mark is as
Okay,
well.
let's not leave any doubt. Okay, let's now vote. Any discussion on the policy?
No.
Okay, so I would make a motion to adopt policy BEF. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Beth,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
I went out of order. Sorry, Jake,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Okay, so the policy is now adopted. And I was saying, Jason's got a setup that will work, for the August 11th meeting. Meredith and I were in here and testing, and I was sitting at a table and she was in another room, and the picture was so-so, which I'm fine with. I don't think video is really what meetings are about. It's about sound. We did have a picture, and we had good high quality sound, at least from my end it was, and I think from Meredith's end and the other, as the remote participant it was as well. So we're good to go ahead. We're talking to Jason about a little bit more of an impermanent investment. He kind of pieced together technology across all the schools that worked really well, but we're talking a little investing in a more permanent setup that maybe is just kind of sitting permanently in the library and accessible for non-board functions as well. But we haven't, even if that doesn't come through, we seem to have a viable technology for August 11th or August 10th. And so just to make it that abundantly clear, this is the last night that board members will need to show up with headphones, and you're experiencing the joy we've had for a year and a half with the echo when you're sitting here. So that'll be gone. Board members will just be sitting at a table. We will be, another thing to make clear, we'll be here in the library. We're kind of until the technology settles down. We just wanted to stay in the library. We can revisit going to the town council chambers at some future point when everybody's technology settles down, but board members will be off their headsets. It'll be in the library, and the public will have a link, or board members who are out of town, which actually will include me next meeting. I'll be on vacation. We'll have a link to participate remotely. So all of those things are going to be in place in the library. Board members don't need to bring a headset. Remote participation will be officially available. Really, if you're a remote participant, it'll look just the same. You'll have a Zoom link. You'll need your internet connection. You'll join the Zoom conference.
So will we be able, next board meeting in which you'll be out of town, will we be able to see and hear you via a central screen somewhere in the room, or?
Yeah, we'll have it on that screen for the audience, but we're working on a second screen for the board to see. And the sound, at the moment, he had the speakers there and the mics up on the table, speakers at the table that Mark's at, and the mics up on the table. But it was the speaker was this big, and it was a good clear sound that filled the whole room. So I'm reasonably optimistic on the technology for next. Might not be the worst idea for board members to bring their computers just one more time as a backup, but I'm quite, Mark's thrilled about that, but I'm quite optimistic. But yeah, maybe it's not the worst thing to have a backup plan, but I'm quite optimistic that Jason's got something that'll work, and we can build it up into a really nice, easy to use setup over time. Any other questions about the logistics? I know that's been, this kind of overlooked thing, but it's actually been a huge issue for board meetings.
Yeah, the only question I have is for people who are attending in person, is there going to be signage showing them where to go? I mean, honestly, I've been a parent in the school district since the pandemic started, basically. I think we were here for a month and a half before the pandemic hit. And I have not, with the exception of the budget meeting, been inside any of our school meetings since the pandemic started. And I have no idea where the library is. So I wonder if there are other members of the public in the similar situation.
That's probably a good point. So it's the high school library, not addressing your point, but for the real old timers, the town library before the new library was built, but it's now known as the high school library. It's also the middle school library, but it exists in the high school building. It's the entrance in the front parking lot for the high school just before you get to the actual entrance by the office. So it looks like the main entrance. It's got a little bit of a vestibule sticking out and a brick mantle in the front side of the parking lot for the high school. And we should probably, at least the door will be propped open so it's not locked, and we'll at least put a sign on the door for the first couple of times.
And we'll
Sounds
give
good.
some direction and when we advertise the meeting.
Great.
Good suggestion.
Any other
But however,
questions?
I predict that most of our participants will continue to be remote, because I think, we get a lot more participation than we used to get when people had to come in person. So I'm glad you're continuing that so that the board meetings are more accessible for the public.
Yeah, curriculum meetings, we have conversations all the time about there were some wins out of COVID. There were a lot of losses, but there were some wins. And I think for the board, this was a win, is remote participation is significantly increased. I don't know how much it increased people watching, because people used to watch on YouTube too, but it's certainly increased the number of people making public comments. And even though it's not an official part of the record, it's increased people engaged through the chat mechanism. So it's been a huge win for involvement and engagement with the board. Okay, next up, we have the budget assessments, warrants, and installment schedules. You may be thinking we already signed these, and we did. But as you probably know, the last minute legislative budget pushed an additional amount of money towards both the towns and the schools. And we were worried about this, but they did include a kind of one-time codicil that allowed that money to be used this year, notwithstanding things that had already been approved in budget meetings. And it did give each town or school unit options to apply it towards additional expenses this year. You can imagine a scenario where we had huge budget cuts that were very painful. And now that we had the extra money, we might want to reverse those. They did give us the option to just put it in the reserves, which could be used for expenses or taxes next year. And they gave us the option to just apply it towards taxes. I'll let Meredith go ahead and speak on that.
Right. So the amount that we received an additional subsidy with the final approved budget is an additional, no, the amount we received in state subsidy in lieu of local subsidy is $302,122.67. So it didn't increase our state allocation overall, which gives the entire amount that the state says we should have in combination of state and local, but it shifted some of the required local over into state subsidy, which is really great news, right? Because they've been working toward trying to get to adequately funding the state funding model since 2008 when it was developed. So in 2000, FY22, we're finally getting there. So this additional 322,000 is not increasing our bottom line, but allowing us to shift from having to burden our local taxpayers for that, being able to use state money for that 302,000. So, I think all along we've talked about this year being a more positive year financially for us in our budget planning process. And so, I remember some discussions we had along the way when we knew this might happen, to say, if there's a way that the state allows us to apply it after referendum, that I think the board consensus at that time was to go ahead and apply it to local taxes this year. That would be one of the three options that Brian outlined. And so that's what Lynn has prepared for us tonight in the documents before you. Revised warrant for assessment and revised schedule of assessing the town, the tax bills. So that's what we're recommending. I think providing this additional relief to the taxpayers this year is consistent with what the state really intended this money to be used for. So I feel like it aligned with what the state was intending with this change and the allowance that they put forward. And I am hopeful that because this is a biennial budget, that we'll see similar levels of state funding next year for education. And so, that we won't need to save some to offset taxes again next year. I feel like in a biennial budget, we're pretty safe to assume that we'll have a solid level of state funding next year as well. So the language of the motion is on the first page, the motion to approve revised assessment warrants and installment schedule. So that would need to be read. And then I have 2 copies of all the documents that board members need to sign. Again, without Rachel, I'm kind of hamstrung with several things, including DocuSign. But I knew we had 4 or 5 board members here tonight, so we can sign them in person. And then Patrick, if you could, if approved, Patrick, if you could stop by and sign them tomorrow or sometime this week would be great.
Yeah, I could definitely stop by this week at some point.
So
Tomorrow's
that's the explanation if you have any questions. And Lynn is on the call, I believe, as well, if you have questions.
So why don't I go ahead and make the motion, then we can have
Okay.
discussion or questions. So I do have to read the whole thing. Motion to approve revised assessment warrants and installment schedules. I move that the revised warrant for assessment of tax and the revised assessment schedule and notice of installments for each member municipality prepared by the treasurer for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 be approved and be issued in form presented to this meeting, and that the treasurer be authorized and directed to deliver to each member municipality its revised warrant for assessment of tax and its revised assessment schedule and notice of installments. This revised assessment warrant is issued to replace the June 22nd, 2021 assessment warrant, which is rescinded. Is there a second?
I second.
So basically for new people, that's just warrants and assessments are the fancy language for our passing taxes over to the town to execute. And we're replacing what we voted on a month ago because the budget's changed. And, you know, and I'll just note, we'd already wired in a tax cut, well, tax savings of about 153,000, which was about, there's a revaluation going on. So what a bill means is going to completely change meanings. It's going to mean more money than it used to, but in old mill language, which is what everybody still understands, it's about 450,000. So by, you know, saving taxes of 150,000, we were cutting taxes by about a third of a mill. And I think we all felt we were able to do that in a way that delivered services and that was sustainable. I don't think any of us felt like we were cutting off our noses for next year. With this additional 300,000, that's pushing 300,002 or whatever it is, it's pushing us up to about 455,000, which comes basically to a full mill of tax cuts that we're putting forward. So, you know, that's good news. I think it's especially good news because I know the town had a very difficult budget year and they're, you know, we go in different directions. We're driven by different things, but they had a tough year. Their expenses are up a lot. So it's nice that the town is able this year to that the schools this year are able to do the opposite and cut taxes. And again, I think it's you know, I'm not going to make a guarantee for 3 years, 5 years out, because that all depends on who's in the legislature and what they do. But at least for next year, like Meredith said, pretty confident that the legislature is going to stay consistent for next year because they've already passed that budget preliminarily, and pretty confident, you know, based on reserves and things, this is sustainable through the next year for sure. So that tax cut for a year. So, you know, we raised taxes for the school construction with the town's approval. We promised 1.9 mil at the vote and it was 1.6, and we had a very small cut last year, and now we've cut a mil off that. So it's really, we're doing school construction, and the ultimate impact on taxes, it's certainly still there, but it's much, much smaller than originally envisioned and promised and voted on by the town. So I would have a very hard time sending the money anywhere except back to the taxpayers. Any other comments or questions? Or are we ready to vote?
I'm definitely supportive of using these funds to reduce the tax burden. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I would just note that I would hope that the town will do the same with any kind of additional funding they're getting through revenue sharing or anything else that they receive because of state decision. I think that you know, there have been some voices in the past, and maybe not necessarily there at the moment, who have made allegations about the school board not being fiscally prudent. In my opinion, those were not true then. It's certainly not true now, and I would hope that the town will follow suit and do the same thing we're doing if they have the opportunity, which I think they do, to do so.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we're ready to vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. So we'll sign the document before we leave the meeting tonight.
And this is one of those documents where you have to sign on the same line every time. It's very strict that way. Lynn will chastise me if I don't get it right. So we'll do it all together to make sure we get it right.
And lastly, we have the added agenda item of the new ed tech position. You want to introduce that, Meredith?
Yeah, so this is, I referenced this earlier when we talked about pulled testing and what it would take, what it would cost. When Karen, Martin, and I attended the webinar and heard what was involved, we really felt like it would require someone to be responsible for organizing and running the program. We do feel like the nurse assistant, the ed tech, to be a nurse assistant under Nurse Martin has worked well this year with the one that we added, the position we added. we feel like adding a second assistant to primarily do pooled testing, but also where there's capacity help out in other ways, is important to be able to do that program. And so really to be ramped up and ready for the school year, I feel like we need to go ahead and get that advertised. I know that probably seems tied to a decision to do pooled testing. So we can have some discussion about that. I think that we will have to, there's some steps that have to be taken that are really just, we don't have to apply and be accepted. We already have the CLIA waiver to do pooled testing. So we just have to fill out some paperwork really to declare that we're moving forward with it. But then we have to really begin ramping up, getting some communicating out to families what this is about, developing our permission documents and systems for tracking all of that. So there's some work to be done. So we'd like to get someone on board to be able to start this work in by mid-August probably.
So I'll make the motion, then we can have discussion. I would make a motion to authorize the creation of a new Ed Tech 2 position for nurse's assistant. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, and you may recall Ed Techs don't come back to the board for approval. So we're not going to be involved in who's hired in this position, but the board's involved in creating slots. So if this passes, would create that slot. I mean, I'll just say, I don't think pooled testing is the answer to everything, but I think increasingly, if you look at the CDC guidance, it's built around the fact that nothing is the single answer to everything. And very early in the process, the idea is a multi-pronged approach to ramp up safety in the schools. And, the 4 prongs they identify are distancing when possible, although they're very clear. Don't let distancing push you back to hybrid and remote. Masks in the schools, and they're clear that the guidance is to recommend, but local conditions may cause other outcomes. Ventilation, and I'll just brag again. I think the district, that was not in the guidance when we started the school year last year, but we did it. And I think it probably made a huge difference. It is in the guidance. Everybody's really recognizing the importance. So that's a 3rd prong, and testing is the 4th prong that well, the 1st prong is encouraging vaccination, which we didn't talk about. You talked about it, but it's in the policy about having clinics and things like that to make it as easy as possible for people to get vaccinated. So really it's the 5th prong is testing. It's voluntary. It's not going to make us have more COVID. It is for sure going to be a piece of the story about helping us to have less COVID and more safety, and it's voluntary. So, and it's being paid for by the federal government. It doesn't impact, local taxpayers. So for me, it's kind of hard to say no to it. But any other thoughts or opinions?
I agree with everything you just said.
I agree with what you shared, Brian. I think too, like, of all of the things, it's probably, well, I don't know, masking is its own set of complexities of how people are making sense of that. But I think this one might be like the hardest one to get the families on board. And so I'm wondering, because, I'm new in this role and I'm playing catch up, Meredith, is there a minimum number for each school for the pool testing? Like what types of involvement do we need to have? And I know this is not so much about the position as it is about the pool testing. So if this is better held at another point, I'm fine with that.
No, I think it's probably the important time to answer these questions because they're tied together. So the program contains a lot of communication materials and marketing materials that we can pull in to use with families, and that'll be a really important part of the ramp up. But previously, when the state had their framework still in place, can you mute? Because I hear an echo every time I talk. no, listen, it's crazy. Previously, when the state still had their guidance in place, they said that for pooled testing to be used as a mitigating factor to eliminate distancing requirements, but that is no more. But that's kind of an idea, I think, of what they were considering to be an essential number for it to be a valid mitigating strategy. It was 30% of your population. And so that includes vaccine. It's 30% of your entire population, because they encourage everyone to be a part of this, vaccinated or not. And so that's the state threshold for what they said you should strive for at a minimum. The more you get, the better it is. And so they gave some other rates of, like, it typically in schools, they find that pool testing comes back positive about 1% of the time, like 1% positive rate. And they gave some rates about the effectiveness of the follow-up test, but really they never said exactly what you should strive for. And I didn't see that in the documents today that I looked through just to refresh and see if there was something new. But I guess I would hope that we would be able to hit 50% with this program per school. That would be, to me, what I would strive for as a minimum, to feel like we're, have enough of a critical mass for it to feel like we're measuring the health of the school. But, I would love it to be higher.
Just the other thing, Beth, about this is that this is not the test where a professional comes and puts something into the back of your brain. This is self-administered, and I have seen kindergartners do this successfully on their own without any parental assistance. So I mean, it's if it was the other one, I wouldn't recommend doing it, but this is self-administered, and it's pretty easy to do even for really little kids.
Yeah, I actually have nephews in Massachusetts who have been doing it since probably, I don't know, they started it a lot earlier there.
Right, they referenced in the webinar Massachusetts as doing pool testing pretty universally as one of their strategies.
Any other questions? Are we ready for a vote?
I have another question. I feel like that's going to be my line. Is the position, I'm jumping to the position now, is it a term position or is it indefinite?
It's a one-year position tied to ESSER funds. I think it will be advertised that way. I think it has to be advertised that way and considered that way at this point.
Anything else? We'll go ahead and vote. So, technically we're voting on the position, but I think if we're authorizing the hire, there's probably going to be some pooled testing we're moving forward with. So on the position, your vote, Beth?
Aye.
And Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark? Aye.
I also vote aye. So that position is authorized for hire. Any requests from board members for other business?
I have, no, it's not business, sorry.
Future agenda items?
Kind of. I was thinking that we should wonder if there's interest in organizing the board to have a walkthrough before our next meeting of the construction, because our next meeting's on the 10th. That's the actual day that the building's supposed to be, or this phase, sorry, the current phase that we're working toward completion in August 10th for substantial completion. And we could organize a walkthrough if board members are interested. So we don't have to advertise that, right? Because
if we're not conducting board business,
right.
I mean, I'll be out of town, so that'll help with us not going over quorum. I don't know how many other people would come.
But I was thinking late the week of the 5th, 6th. I don't know if you'll be out of town then, to see if we could line it up on the 5th of the 6th. But I'll put out a doodle poll. I guess I'll read the agenda meeting requirements. I don't think we have to advertise that because we're not going to be discussing business or taking up business.
Yeah, I mean, we're not voting is the really key
Yeah.
thing, but yeah.
Okay, we'll send out a doodle poll to see what works and talk with the contractor.
Any other requests for future agenda items? All right. I mean, as you know, we're turning the corner into August, the start of the school year. There's always a slate of business. So it's not like we need to fill agendas, and we still will have the COVID topic come up on August 11th too. Is there any public comment?
I would like to comment.
Go ahead, Rose.
Nice to see you all, and thank you all for having this meeting this summer. Things are going really well with our ESY program. I've been enjoying it as much as they have. We have going here. Last week we were on field trips the whole week. Everyone was cooperating well. We had only a few behavior issues, but I have to say that seeing everyone working well together, middle school and high school, and the teachers, those masked and unmasked, I just want to let you know to be encouraged that we didn't see people teasing each other. We didn't see people fighting with each other, those who had masks and didn't have masks. It's going really well, and we've done some amazing things. So I want to encourage all your parents and the public to know that we're going to have a great slide presentation for you in the end.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Go ahead if you wanted to speak. The only person, Jose, did you want to speak or not?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last comment with regards to the, to the policy. I already made kind of my position known in terms of the masking, but just a general comment. The best policy is going to be something that can be adhered to and applied effectively and efficiently. And right now, just looking at that one item from the masking perspective, we can't do that. Right? Somebody who's not vaccinated does not want to wear a mask. There's no way to recognize that. There's no way to take any any reparative or helpful action to help that along. And as a matter of fact, all the way until we're red, which may be a little too late, is the only time that there's any kind of proactive measure, because even at orange, right? You know what I mean? We're saying that only those that are unvaccinated have to wear a mask. But the way that the CDC has given you the guidance, and I can certainly appreciate, the position you folks are in, having to come up with guidance and policy, but the way they've set it up, even at orange, which is a fairly high risk at that point in time, somebody who's unvaccinated, can still go without wearing a mask, and there's nothing that the school or anybody else is going to be able to do about it. So I just wanted to, kind of put that at the same time, and not at the same time, but aside from that, I want to say, I don't know if you've heard it enough, but I think you as a collective group, the community as a collective group, the school and the students, the teachers, everybody involved, just did a pretty, great job getting us through last year and doing the best you could to give our students as much a normal education as possible. So I truly appreciate that, and I hope that my comments here don't come across as anything less than grateful for everything that all you folks here on the screen have done. But I just part of what I do in my position at work is, track this kind of information and try to look forward towards projecting and forecasting for the hospital. So I'm pretty well tied into this stuff, and I think about this stuff a lot. The other piece that I wanted to say real quick is we've heard some references here today that things are pretty good right now. I just wanted to point out that things are exactly today as they were last summer when we didn't have a vaccination because we were not in school, we were socially distancing, and we were wearing masks. So that was just as effective as what we're doing now. I think the piece that we need to be more concerned with is what is this going to look like in the fall during the flu season? Because we went from about a handful of people hospitalized across the state, last August to over 200 by January or February or so. So the situation may change, especially for those folks that are unvaccinated. So that was my piece. And thank you so much for allowing us to be here.
Thank you. And just to be clear, we appreciate both the critical and the appreciative comments. So that's what we're here for. We really appreciate all comments. Sam, did I read that you were wanting to speak? Or not?
No, sorry, I was just showing my appreciation for the comments.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. Any other public comments? All right, we'll go ahead and next board meeting will be, as noted, it will be remote and in person. So it'll be both. We're finally going hybrid in board meetings after leaving that behind in the schools. We'll be remote and in person Tuesday, August 10th, 2021 in the library, high school library at 6 p.m. I say that'll be the next board meeting, but in fact, we're probably going to schedule an emergency board meeting sometime, possibly next week, to make a couple hires happen. But that will be a, hire only meeting, nothing else on the agenda. But that's the next regularly scheduled board meeting. That's the next meeting. We know its timing as of right now. Is there any requests from the board for information or follow-up?
Just add one, just a reminder that at some point I would like a comparison between our district and others for early release days. No rush on that, but sooner at some point would be good.
Yes, it's on the list. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion on adjourning? There never is. All right, Beth,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.